what if the airplane isn't the most valuable thing at the airport? That might sound strange. After all, airports exist because airplanes land, take off, and carry millions of passengers across the country every year. But there's another business happening around those airplanes. And once you look at the numbers, it becomes surprisingly large. In 2023, the 138 busiest commercial service airports in the United States generated about 46% of their operating revenue from what the government classifies as non-aeronautical revenue. That means revenue generated from activities other than the direct operation and landing of aircraft. And some of the biggest pieces of that business aren't hidden very far away. They're sitting right in front of you. Parking, rental cars, restaurants, retail, services, and commercial spaces that businesses pay to operate inside the airport. In fact, those 138 airports generated approximately $5.9 billion from ground transportation and parking, and another $2.3 billion from terminal concessions in 2023. Together, those two categories represented nearly 30% of their annual operating revenue. So here's the question. If airports are built to move airplanes and passengers, why has so much of the business moved onto the ground? And more importantly, how did the passenger become such a valuable part of the airport business? This is the business unseen. When you walk into an airport, the obvious business is aviation. There are gates, runways, jet bridges, baggage systems, and all the infrastructure needed to move aircraft and passengers safely. There are also airlines paying fees to use airport facilities. That's the part everyone notices. But an airport is also an enormous piece of commercial infrastructure. And the deeper you look, the more businesses you find operating around the passenger journey. Before you even reach the terminal, you may have already entered the commercial side of the airport. You might park your car. You might pay for a shuttle. You might use a rental car. Inside the terminal, you might buy coffee, food, a book, headphones, a gift, or something you forgot to pack. And the airport can earn revenue connected to many of those activities. This is what makes the modern airport so interesting. It doesn't have to sell you a product directly. It has something businesses already want, access to a huge, concentrated flow of passengers. And that changes the economics completely. Let's start with the category that most travelers probably don't think of as an airport business at all. Parking. According to the Government Accountability Office's analysis of FAA data, the nation's 138 busiest commercial service airports generated approximately $5.9 billion from ground transportation and parking in 2023. That's not money from selling airline tickets. It's not money from passengers buying food. It's not money from retail stores. It's money generated by moving people to and from the airport and giving them somewhere to leave their vehicles. And this tells us something important. The airport business begins before you ever walk through the terminal doors. Think about your own trip. You leave home. You drive toward the airport. You enter a parking facility. You leave your car. You take a shuttle or walk toward the terminal. You've already entered the airport's economic system. And the airplane hasn't even become part of your journey yet. That's the first clue that the modern airport is much bigger than the runway. Now imagine the other end of the journey. You land in another city, collect your luggage, and need transportation. At many airports, rental car companies operate directly on airport property. That creates another commercial relationship between the airport, the rental car business, and the passenger. The Government Accountability Office explains that non-aeronautical revenue can come from businesses such as concessions, car rentals, and parking, and that a portion of sales from these operations can flow back to airports through negotiated revenue-sharing agreements. So the airport doesn't necessarily need to operate a rental car company itself. It can provide the infrastructure and access to passengers. The rental company provides the service, and the airport can receive revenue under the commercial arrangement. That's a recurring theme we're going to see throughout this story. The airport doesn't need to sell everything. It needs to control valuable infrastructure and passenger access. Now, let's look at a real airport. Cleveland Hopkins International Airport. Its 2025 FAA financial filing gives us a remarkably clear picture of how this works. The airport reported approximately $73.6 million in total aeronautical revenue. That is the revenue directly connected to aviation operations. But its reported non-aeronautical revenue was approximately $92.4 million. In other words, at Cleveland Hopkins in that fiscal year, the reported non-aeronautical revenue was greater than the reported aeronautical revenue. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Parking and ground transportation generated approximately $53.8 million. Rental cars generated about $13.9 million. Food and beverage generated approximately $3.7 million. Retail stores and duty-free generated about $2.7 million. Look at that breakdown. The airport's commercial story isn't simply about people buying things in stores. Parking alone was a much larger source of non-aeronautical revenue than retail and duty-free. That changes the question. The interesting business isn't just, what can we sell passengers? It's, what parts of the passenger journey can the airport support and monetize? Think about what an airport actually controls. It manages parking and provides space for rental cars, restaurants, retailers, and other businesses. But the most valuable thing may be much simpler. The passenger is already there. A shopping center has to persuade you to drive there. At an airport, you already have a flight, a destination, and time before boarding. That makes passenger flow a valuable commercial asset. The flight creates the reason you're there. The airport can then build businesses around the journey. Now, think about the terminal differently. That restaurant is occupying space where passengers are already walking. The coffee shop is inside a terminal where travelers may have limited time and alternatives. The retail store doesn't need to persuade you to make a special trip. You're already walking past it. And the advertising screen doesn't need to convince you to visit the airport. The audience is already there. The value isn't only in the square footage. It's in who passes through it and the time they spend there. So who actually gets the money? It's not as simple as saying the airport owns every restaurant or store. In many cases, private businesses operate within airport facilities under commercial agreements. The Government Accountability Office notes that a portion of sales from businesses such as concessions, car rentals, and parking can be provided to airports through negotiated revenue-sharing agreements. A passenger buys a meal, rents a car, or parks for 5 days. The business earns revenue, and the airport can receive its share under the commercial agreement. The important point is that the airport doesn't need to become a restaurant chain, rental car company, or retail company. It can operate the platform on which those businesses exist. And that's a powerful business model. At major airports, this isn't just a handful of stores beside the gates. It's an entire ecosystem. In 2023, the 138 busiest commercial service airports served approximately 97% of U.S. air travelers. An airport is not one business. It's a collection of businesses operating around a transportation system. Here's another important detail. Not every airport has the same business model. The Government Accountability Office found that in 2023, non-aeronautical revenue represented about 19% of total operating revenue at John F. Kennedy International Airport, compared with approximately 54% at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. That's a huge difference. So we shouldn't say all airports make most of their money from parking and shopping. The evidence doesn't support that. Airports have different revenue structures, but they share one valuable asset: passenger traffic. Airports have developed commercial services for decades, adding restaurants, retail, parking, rental cars, advertising, and other services. Once passenger traffic becomes a commercial asset, the layout of the terminal matters. Where people walk matters. Where stores are located matters. Where restaurants are placed matters. The airport isn't just moving people. It's managing a flow of people through valuable commercial space. And this brings us back to the original question. Why does an airport need so many businesses beyond the runway? Because the airplane creates the traffic, but the passenger creates dozens of additional economic opportunities. The journey begins with transportation, then parking or drop-off, security, waiting, food, retail, boarding, arrival, and ground transportation. Every stage creates business opportunities. That's why calling an airport a shopping mall is only part of the story. A shopping mall is built around retail. An airport is built around movement. The shopping, food, parking, rental cars, and advertising are layers built around that movement. The real asset is passenger flow. But there's one important caveat. Much of the nationwide airport financial data comes from the FAA's Certification Activity Tracking System, known as CATS. In April 2026, the Government Accountability Office reviewed that system and found limitations involving completeness, timeliness, and accuracy. GAO found that most required airports submitted data, but some smaller airports did not. It also identified anomalies and potential errors in the data. That doesn't mean the numbers are useless. It means we should use them responsibly. When we say that the busiest 138 airports generated billions from parking and concessions, we're reporting what the FAA data analyzed by GAO show. Good business storytelling isn't about finding the biggest number. It's about understanding what the number means. Here's the part one find most fascinating. An airport appears to sell transportation. But underneath that is also selling access. Access to passengers. Access to valuable physical space. Access to a predictable flow of people. Access to customers who are already there. And that's why an airport can support so many different businesses at once. The passenger may think, I need a coffee. The restaurant thinks, there's a customer. The advertiser thinks, there's an audience. The airport thinks, there's a commercial ecosystem operating on our property. Same passenger, different economic perspectives. That's the business hiding in plain sight. So the next time you're sitting at an airport gate waiting for your flight, look around. Don't just look at the airplane. Look at everything surrounding you. The parking structure, the rental cars, the restaurant, the coffee, the stores, the advertisements, and the terminal space all of those businesses occupy. None of those things is the reason the airplane exists. But all of them exist because millions of people are moving through the airport. And that movement has enormous economic value. The modern airport isn't simply a place where airplanes arrive and leave. It's transportation infrastructure, commercial real estate, a parking business, a rental car hub, a restaurant district, a retail environment, and an advertising platform. The airplane gets you there, but the passenger is what makes the entire ecosystem valuable. Once you understand that, you may never look at an airport the same way again. Next time you walk through a terminal, you won't just see gates and airplanes. You'll see the business underneath. If you enjoyed uncovering the business hidden behind something you see every day, please like this video, share it with someone who would find interesting, and subscribe to The Business Unseen for more stories about the surprising businesses hiding in plain sight.